A protester assaulted after people pulled him into a Chinese consulate in the UK. British police now investigating. Beijing refusing to renounce the use of force on Taiwan. The head of the Chinese Communist Party reiterated the message during a major Congress meeting. A setback for Shein, the fast fashion brand from China. It involves a $1.9 million fine slapped on the company by New York State. Texas moving to safeguard retirement assets, cutting teacher pension funds exposure to Chinese stocks in half. And Beijing ready to use force on Taiwan when China feels necessary. How should the island react? An expert breaks it down. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. British police are investigating an incident in the British city of Manchester. 5 men from the Chinese consulate there reportedly pulled a protester into the consulate grounds and assaulted him. The incident left cuts and bruises on the protester's face. In response, Beijing says its embassy and consulates in the UK always abide by the laws of their host country. Here's more on what's happening.
UK police are investigating the apparent assault of a Hong Kong pro-democracy protester who was pulled into Chinese consular grounds and beaten. The incident happened during a demonstration against Chinese President Xi Jinping on Sunday in the city of Manchester in northwest England. In a video posted online by the BBC, a man in a black cap and a ponytail can be seen being hauled by several men through a gate into Chinese consular grounds. The protester, known as Bob, is then kicked and punched by 5 men as he lies on the floor. Police at the scene eventually step in to free him. A Greater Manchester police spokesperson told Reuters police inquiries were ongoing into the circumstances. They added that their officers responded immediately to defuse the situation. Speaking after the incident to the BBC, Bob, who has recently emigrated from Hong Kong, said the protest was peaceful.
Several
people from the Chinese consulate came out and destroyed our belongings. When we tried to stop them, they dragged me in and then punched and kicked me. Later, the British police pulled me out again. It's unreasonable and should not be done, because we have the freedom to express things. This is the reason why we came out to protest. The so-called government of Hong Kong says we are thugs. What are people in your government in China doing now? Who are the thugs? We are a peaceful demonstration. Why beat us?
Britain's Foreign Office did not immediately respond to a request for comment. In a post on Twitter, Alicia Kearns, a Conservative Member of Parliament and head of the Foreign Affairs Committee, has called on the Chinese ambassador to be summoned. The Chinese consulate in Manchester offered no immediate reply to requests from Reuters for comment. But at a news conference in Beijing, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin told reporters he wasn't aware of the situation. He added the Chinese embassy and consulate in the UK always abide by the laws of their host country. A friend of the man involved, who was also at the scene, said Bob had been left with cuts and bruises to his face and went to hospital for treatment. Protesters with banners had been outside the consulate during the first day of the Communist Party Congress. It is widely expected that Xi will be granted a third 5-year leadership term during the twice-decade event.
The British Prime Minister's office described the reports as extremely disturbing, saying police patrols had been stepped up in Manchester following the incident. China's Communist Party leader says China has achieved comprehensive control over Hong Kong. As for Taiwan, he reiterated Beijing will not renounce the use of force to take over the island. Here's more.
Leader of the Chinese regime, Xi Jinping, signaled on Sunday that his government would maintain policies over Hong Kong and Taiwan at the opening of the Communist Party Congress in Beijing. He said China had effectively exercised full control over Hong Kong and achieved comprehensive control, changing the situation in the city from chaos to governance. He said, "We will make sure the central government exercise overall jurisdiction over Hong Kong and Macau and make sure they are administered by patriots." She said China will faithfully implement the policies of one country, two systems. The party leader said China will continue to strive for a peaceful reunification with Taiwan, but we will never promise to renounce the use of force, and we reserve the option of taking all measures necessary. She said the use of force is directed at outside forces, interference, and separatists who seek Taiwan's independence. Taiwan and China split during a civil war in 1949 that brought the communists to power in China. Many Taiwanese reject the term reunification. They are saying that they were never part of communist China. The Communist Party's policies on Taiwan and Hong Kong have been harshly criticized by the US and other democracies. The twice-a-decade party Congress is expected to give Xi a record third 5-year term in office, cementing his place as the party's most powerful ruler since Mao Zedong.
Xi Jinping used the term patriots in saying that Beijing makes sure Hong Kong is administered by patriots. The term patriots here refers to people who are loyal to the Chinese Communist Party. For example, the head of Hong Kong has been elected by people consisting of almost only these so-called patriots. China has officially kicked off its most important political meeting, the 20th Communist Party Congress. Here are the key takeaways.
Kicking off the Chinese Communist Party's Congress on Sunday, Chinese leader Xi Jinping said he wants a world-class military.
We must implement the party's idea of strengthening the military in this new era, implement the military strategic policy for this new era, and maintain the party's absolute leadership over the people's military.
The party Congress is crucial for the Chinese regime. It will decide who will hold positions of power in China. And Xi Jinping is expected to secure an unprecedented third term. Party leaders would also set out their priorities and goals for the next 5 years. Xi spoke for 2 hours, listing out achievements under his rule. Most China observers say there were no signals of changes or anything new. It stayed consistent with his past speeches. Xi hailed the country's zero COVID-19 policy. That's despite it having wreaked havoc on China's economy. Xi also spent more time talking about the need to maintain national security. An expert gave his take on what could happen after the party congress.
But what that means is that Xi Jinping will now have established his control over the party. So since he does have his domestic situation in place, we should expect that he now has the opportunity to convert his power and attention in international politics against his neighbors in the South China Sea, against U.S. interests in the Indo-Pacific and globally.
The meeting runs for a week, wrapping up this Saturday.
Chinese fast fashion retailer Shein is back in the spotlight. This time, it's over an almost $2 million fine, a data breach, and leaked passwords. Here's more.
A setback for one of the world's fastest-growing e-retailers, Shein. New York State has slapped a $1.9 million fine on Shein's parent company. That's over failing to secure customer information from a data breach, plus lying to customers about the scale of the breach. Shein is a fast fashion retailer from China. It's popular among millennials and Gen Zers in the U.S. The company's sales in America exploded during the pandemic. At one point in 2021, the numbers even surpassed established brands like H&M and Zara. In 2018, hackers targeted Shein's parent company, Zotop. They got their hands on the personal information of tens of millions of the company's customers. Among them, over 800,000 are residents of New York. The data breach includes credit card information, names, email addresses, and account passwords. Hackers were able to steal login credentials for 39 million Shein users. But Zotop only contacted a fraction of those 39 million users about the data breach. It also didn't take measures to protect other accounts that were compromised. That's according to a statement from the New York State Attorney General. The statement adds, Zotop tried to downplay the scale of the breach.
Texas is keeping a closer eye on its teachers' pension funds by limiting their exposure to Chinese stocks. The state's teacher retirement system just got the go-ahead to move to a new benchmark with fewer Chinese stocks. The move would reduce the pension fund's exposure to China by half, about 1.5%. The pension fund holds over $180 billion in assets. It will begin a 6-month transition period this month to adjust its portfolio. Now we turn to Europe. The head of Germany's domestic intelligence service, Thomas Haldenwang, gave an update Monday. He said China's influence on the West is far bigger than Russia's. Quoting foreign partners, he added, "Russia is the storm, China is climate change." The German government seems divided over how to handle China. A heated debate is happening in Berlin over whether to let a Chinese shipping company invest in a port in Hamburg City. It's Germany's most important port. Intelligence says China could use stake it holds in critical infrastructure as leverage to pursue political goals, and control over a port would be considered critical infrastructure. Germany's economy ministry also wants to veto the Chinese company's bid to buy a stake in the port. But the chancellor seems to be leaning more in favor of the business side. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz says decoupling from China is the wrong answer. Scholz said at a Berlin business conference last week that Germany must continue to do business with China. Scholz reportedly plans to visit Beijing in early November, making him the first G7 leader to travel to China since the start of the pandemic. Decoupling from China wouldn't be easy for Germany. China has been Germany's largest economic partner since 2015. Last year alone, the two countries exchanged almost $240 billion worth of goods. Back when taking office, Scholz said he emphasized a values-based foreign policy, one that would focus on democracy and human rights. Scholz's cabinet pushed for a harsher stance on China. This marked a shift in attitude from former Chancellor Merkel, who largely took a business-first stance toward China. Now we turn to an update on China's pandemic situation. Is it possible to eat while wearing a mask? Well, some people in China have figured out a way. While most of the world is learning to live with COVID-19 in low numbers, China, on the other hand, continues to maintain its strict zero COVID-19 policy. Here's more on what's happening.
New videos went viral of Chinese citizens wearing a beak mask while eating. Eating with a mask on is part of the Chinese regime's strict zero COVID policy. In a video, children at school are seen eating with their masks on. The Chinese regime's harsh measures to contain the CCP virus has received a lot of backlash from Chinese citizens on social media. In one video, two girls on a train took their mask off to eat, and a person nearby reported that to the police. They then asked the girls about the purpose of eating. And another video shows the owner of a restaurant eating alone until two COVID prevention staff came in and demanded that he wear a mask. A heated argument then broke out.
China recently reiterated its readiness to use force on Taiwan if or when China feels it's necessary. What's the first step Taiwan should take in that worst-case scenario? We spoke with James Carafano, the Heritage Foundation's Vice President for National Security and Foreign Policy, to find out more. And James, you mentioned earlier how, the U.S. will most likely make sure Taiwan can defend itself and make sure this Taiwan Strait is open, since it's strategically important to us and economically important to us, never mind ideologically. So what would those steps look like?
Well, I think clearly, if you want to take a lesson away from the Ukraine war, why the Ukrainians were successful is, first of all, they demonstrated the willingness and capacity to fight on their own, and that gave essentially time for the West to kind of catch up with supporting the Ukrainians. I think the lesson for Taiwan is that's a situation you want to duplicate. You want to be able to survive an initial Chinese attack to demonstrate that you can, and then you want to have a way that people can bring you aid and support and be resupplied. So that means holding Chinese Air Force at risk at depth, right? It means preventing ships from being able to move in and land on your shores. So that's anti-ship missiles. It means holding the places that the Chinese would launch capabilities from in the mainland at risk. So the ability to fire long-range missiles to interdict ports and airfields and other facilities.
That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for more than a year. Here's what to look out for in our second half. Washington's declining power on the world stage not only harms its own interests, but also boosts totalitarian regimes. That's according to James Carafano, the Heritage Foundation's Vice President for National Security and Foreign Policy.
We need to be not stupid and recognize what the Chinese are doing. They're not out to coexist with us. They're not out to live side by side with us. They're not out to be tolerant about us. They're out to see less of us.
The full episode is available on our partner platform, Epoch TV. To sign up, click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow.
Shenyun Creations, the streaming platform from Shenyun, featuring world-class dance, past programs, and all original music. Masterclasses, behind the scenes, comedy, and more. Explore ShenyunCreations.com.